Captain Eleanor Wright stood at the Mars Observatory's primary viewing station, her coffee forgotten in her hand as she watched the fabric of space tear open. The quantum ruptures started as pinpricks of violet light against the black canvas of space, each one expanding into a swirling vortex large enough to swallow Earth's largest battleships whole. She had trained for first contact scenarios throughout her 15-year career with the United Earth Space Command, but nothing could have prepared her for this moment. Secondary arrays confirm multiple signatures, Lieutenant James Martinez reported, his voice steady despite the tension evident in his posture. We're tracking over 300 capital ships emerging from the ruptures, size estimates putting them between 2 to 5 kilometers in length each. The Draconian warships emerged like sea creatures surfacing from the depths. Their hulls pulsed with bioorganic light patterns, creating waves of illumination that rippled across their serpentine forms. Each vessel seemed to be a hybrid of grown crystal and forged metal, with segments that moved and shifted like living tissue. The fleet arranged itself in a perfect geometric pattern that spelled out power and precision in any language. "Get me a direct line to Earth Command," Eleanor ordered, finally setting down her coffee cup with a hand that only slightly trembled. "And someone wake up Dr. Henderson in xenobiology. Those light patterns on their hulls, they're not just for show." Before her crew could comply, every screen in the observatory flickered to life. The face that appeared wasn't quite reptilian, but it wasn't human either. The Draconian commander's scales shimmered with iridescent patterns that matched their ships, and their vertical pupils dilated slightly as they assessed the humans before them. "People of Earth," the alien spoke in perfect English, their words synchronized across every broadcasting channel on and around Earth. "I am Supreme Commander Vexthor of the Draconian Armada. Your civilization has been assessed and found worthy of addition to our empire. You will submit to our authority within 48 of your Earth hours, or face immediate extinction." Eleanor watched as additional feeds appeared, showing the systematic destruction of other worlds. Cities turned to ash under weapon systems that seemed to ignore the laws of physics. Entire fleets of ships more advanced than Earth's best vessels crumbled like paper in a fire. The message was clear. Resistance wasn't just futile, it was suicidal. To demonstrate our superiority and the futility of resistance, Vexthor continued, "We have disabled your primary defense satellites with a targeted quantum pulse. Your primitive weapons cannot harm our bioforged hulls. Your technology is centuries behind ours. But serve us well, and you may earn the right to learn from us." In the United Nations Emergency Session Chamber, delegates from every nation watched in horror as their military advisors confirmed the Draconians' claims. Earth's orbital defense grid had been neutralized without a single shot fired. Traditional radar couldn't even properly track the alien vessels. Their biomechanical nature confused sensors designed to detect either mechanical or organic signatures, but not both simultaneously. Yet in a secure bunker beneath the Pacific Ocean, Admiral Sarah Chen found herself focused on a curious detail. "Play back the transmission," she ordered her staff. "Focus on the background of their command ship. Those light patterns, they're not random." As the world's governments scrambled to form a response, with some already drafting surrender documents, small teams of scientists began noticing other anomalies. The Draconian ships' movements followed oddly organic patterns. Their communication signatures contained frequencies surprisingly similar to certain Earth phenomena. And in a deep-sea research station off the coast of Puerto Rico, Dr. Amanda Reynolds looked up from her bacterial cultures with sudden inspiration. "Holy shit," she whispered, watching her latest sonic experiments effect on deep-sea bacteria. "That's it. That's how their ships move like living things. They're not just using biomechanical technology. They're using something almost exactly like our own deep-sea bacterial colonies to coordinate their fleet movements." As the 48-hour deadline loomed, humanity faced a choice that wasn't really a choice at all. Submit to alien rule or face extinction. But in scattered laboratories and research stations across the globe, the seeds of an impossible plan were taking root. The Draconians had made a critical mistake. They had given humanity time to think. Dr. Amanda Reynolds hadn't slept in 36 hours, but sleep was the last thing on her mind as she stared at the bacterial cultures gleaming under her laboratory's specialized lighting. The same bioluminescent patterns she'd been studying for the past 3 years now danced across her vision every time she closed her eyes, not from exhaustion, but from the eerily similar patterns she'd seen in the Draconian transmission. "Play it again, Nathan," she called to her research assistant, who had stayed with her despite the evacuation orders. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the massive alien vessels moving in their perfect formation. Amanda leaned forward, her glasses sliding down her nose as she compared the light patterns to her microscope feed. "Everyone's looking at their weapons, their size, their technology," she muttered, switching between magnification levels. "Nobody's asking how they coordinate such precise movements across such vast distances. Look at this, Nathan." She split the screen, showing the bacterial dance of deep-sea microorganisms next to the Draconian fleet movements. These aren't just similar patterns, they're nearly identical frequency oscillations. "Remember that accident 3 years ago?" Nathan winced. Nobody who had been present during the Puerto Rico incident could forget it. A malfunction in their sonic mapping equipment had nearly killed Amanda and 2 other researchers at 20,000 feet below sea level. The bacteria they'd been studying had reacted violently to the sonic frequencies, disrupting all their equipment's electrical systems. "The bacteria we found in the trench," Amanda continued, her words coming faster as excitement overtook exhaustion. "They communicate through quantum entanglement. That's why they can coordinate their movements instantly across vast distances in complete darkness. The Draconians aren't just using advanced technology. They're using living systems similar to what we have right here on Earth." Her fingers flew across the haptic interface, pulling up data from the incident. The sonic frequencies that had caused the chaos were still recorded in perfect detail, along with their effect on the bacterial colony's communication patterns. A priority message flashed across her screen. "Admiral Chen requesting updates from all scientific facilities." Amanda hesitated for just a moment before hitting the reply button. Her theory was wild, possibly insane. But right now, insane might be exactly what Earth needed. "Nathan, hit me a secure line to the Admiral. And I need you to start cultures of the PR7 bacterial strain. All of them." The next few hours became a blur of explanations, demonstrations, and arguments with other scientists. Amanda found herself presenting her findings to a virtual panel of Earth's top military and scientific minds, her disheveled appearance a stark contrast to their crisp uniforms and professional attire. "The Draconians aren't just using biomechanical technology," she explained, her voice growing hoarse. "They're using bacterial colonies as living quantum computers to coordinate their fleet movements. The light patterns we see on their ships aren't decorative. They're the visible manifestation of bacterial communication, just like our deep-sea bioluminescent colonies." Admiral Chen leaned forward in her video feed. "And you believe we can disrupt this communication?" Amanda nodded, pulling up the data from the Puerto Rico incident. 3 years ago, a specific sonic frequency caused our bacterial colonies to break their quantum communication chains. The disruption cascaded through the entire colony within seconds. If the Draconians are using similar bacterial systems, their entire fleet could be vulnerable, the Admiral finished, her eyes widening with understanding. "But we'd need to test it," Amanda cautioned. "And we'd need a way to broadcast the right frequencies across space. The physics involved." "Leave the broadcasting to us," interrupted Dr. Marcus Webb from the Acoustic Engineering Division. "We've been working on something that might just do the trick. Can you get us a sample of these bacteria and the exact frequencies that affected them?" Amanda glanced at her cultures, already multiplying in their growth medium. "Better than that. I can give you live colonies to test with, but we'll need to work fast. Some of these frequencies might have to be fine-tuned to affect their specific bacterial strains." As the meeting ended, Amanda finally allowed herself to feel a glimmer of hope. The Draconians had given Earth 48 hours, expecting panic and submission. Instead, they had given humanity just enough time to discover their greatest weakness, a weakness that, by incredible cosmic irony, humanity was uniquely positioned to exploit. The deep-sea research vessel Neptune's Shadow cut through the dark waters of the Puerto Rico Trench, its reinforced hull groaning under the immense pressure. Dr. Amanda Reynolds checked her watch. 32 hours remained until the draconian deadline. The vessel's external lights illuminated nothing but an endless curtain of black water as they descended past 18,000 feet. Hull integrity at 97%, reported Captain Miguel Santos, his experienced hand steady on the controls. Dr. Reynolds, are you sure we need to go this deep? We could cultivate the samples from the shallower colonies. Amanda shook her head, checking the readings on her equipment. The deeper strains are more resistant to pressure changes. If we're going to affect bacteria in space, we need the hardiest samples we can get. She didn't mention that these were also the same bacteria that had nearly killed her 3 years ago. Some details were better left unsaid. At 19,000 feet, the first warning alarm sounded. A hairline crack had developed in one of the sample collection tubes, the immense pressure finding a weak point in the reinforced material. Chief Engineer Sarah Walker moved quickly to seal it, her movements precise despite the urgency. 20 minutes until we reach optimal depth, Sarah announced, wiping sweat from her forehead. Though I'd feel better if we weren't pushing an experimental vessel to its absolute limits. Above them, the world's scientists were already preparing for their part in Operation Symphony, as Dr. Marcus Webb had dubbed it. The global network of underwater research stations was being converted into the largest acoustic broadcast array ever created. Engineers worked in shifts, modifying equipment that had never been designed for this purpose. At 20,000 feet, they found what they were looking for. The bacterial colonies glowed in complex patterns against the black water, their bioluminescence creating an otherworldly display. Amanda's hands trembled slightly as she operated the collection equipment, memories of her last dive here threatening to surface. Beginning sample collection, she announced, trying to keep her voice steady. These colonies are perfect. They're even showing the quaternary communication patterns we need. The collection proceeded smoothly for the first 10 minutes. Then everything went wrong at once. A sharp crack echoed through the vessel, followed by the scream of tearing metal. Warning lights flooded the cabin with red as water began spraying from a rupture in the main sample collection line. The pressure difference was explosive, turning the leak into a knife-like spray that cut through a secondary power conduit. Emergency power, Captain Santos shouted, as the vessel's main lights flickered and died. Seal off the collection chamber. Amanda lunged for the bacterial samples they'd already collected, securing them just as the emergency bulkhead slammed down. Sarah was already moving, her tools ready as she fought to seal the breach. The whole vessel groaned as the structural integrity field struggled to compensate. We've lost 30% of hull integrity, Sarah reported through gritted teeth. We need to surface. Now. But Amanda's eyes were fixed on the bacterial samples, watching their reaction to the emergency systems. The colonies were pulsing with an unusual pattern she'd never seen before. Wait, the emergency field harmonics. They're affecting the bacteria differently than our old sonic tests. This is better than what we were looking for. She quickly connected her tablet to the ship's sensors, recording everything. The combination of pressure, sound, and electromagnetic fluctuations from the damaged power systems was creating a perfect storm of disruption in the bacterial communication patterns. 3 minutes, Captain Santos warned. That's all I can give you before we have to ascend. Amanda worked frantically, her fingers flying over the controls as she documented every aspect of this accidental discovery. When they finally began their emergency ascent, she had everything they needed. And more. 27 hours until the deadline. The Neptune's Shadow limped back to the surface, its hull scared but its mission accomplished. As they emerged into sunlight, they could see the Draconian ships in high orbit, their bioluminescent patterns clearly visible even in daylight. Amanda clutched the secured samples, now knowing exactly how to disrupt those patterns. "Get me a secure line to Dr. Webb," she ordered as soon as they were in communication range. "Tell him to modify the broadcast arrays. We're not just going to disrupt their bacterial communications, we're going to completely sever their quantum links. And I know exactly how to do it." Supreme Commander Vexthor watched Earth's apparent descent into chaos with smug satisfaction. His massive command center displayed hundreds of data streams simultaneously, each showing a different aspect of human civilization, apparently crumbling under the pressure of his ultimatum. "Primitive species are so predictable," he commented to his senior strategist, Kafol. "Look at how they scatter like prey animals." On the main display, refugee ships fled Earth in seemingly random directions. Military vessels made erratic course changes, some appearing to chase the civilian ships, others moving to protect them. Global news feeds showed protests in major cities, and social media buzzed with panic and conspiracy theories. What the Draconians couldn't know was that every single movement was choreographed. In the underground command center beneath Mount Cheyenne, Admiral Sarah Chen watched the same chaos with fierce pride. "Status report on Operation Echo Chamber," she commanded. Colonel Jessica Martinez, head of cyber operations, allowed herself a small smile. "Social media penetration exceeding expectations, Admiral. Our AI-generated panic posts are being amplified by Draconian monitoring systems, exactly as Dr. Reynolds predicted. They're particularly focused on stories about Earth's military leadership fleeing to underground bunkers in the oceans." "Perfect." The Admiral turned to another screen. "Captain Wright, status of the fleet movements." Eleanor Wright, recently promoted and pulled from Mars Observatory, nodded crisply. "Every ship is hitting its marks exactly on schedule. The Draconians are interpreting our precision maneuvers as panic-driven randomness. Their fleet is adjusting position exactly as we hoped, moving to cover what they perceive as gaps in our chaotic defense." In high orbit, the Draconian Armada shifted in response to each new human movement. Their biomechanical ships pulsed with confident patterns of light as they positioned themselves for what they assumed would be a simple subjugation of a primitive species. "The humans are behaving exactly as our conquest simulations predicted," Kafol reported, his scales rippling with amusement. "Their social media indicates their leadership is attempting to hide in underwater facilities. Shall we demonstrate our ability to reach them even there?" "No," Vexthor replied, mandibles clicking in satisfaction. "Let them hide in their oceans. When they realize even the depths cannot protect them, their submission will be absolute." He gestured to a display showing increased energy signatures from Earth's oceans. "See how they waste energy trying to fortify their underwater refuges. Such primitive thinking." Those energy signatures, of course, were from Dr. Webb's modified sonic broadcast arrays being brought online. Each burst of power was carefully disguised as desperate attempts to power underwater defensive shields. Shields that any advanced species knew couldn't possibly work. In the Pacific Command Center, Dr. Amanda Reynolds watched the bacterial response tests with growing excitement. "The Draconians are completely focused on our surface movements," she reported. "They haven't even noticed the sonic frequencies we're testing. Their arrogance is working against them. They're so convinced we're primitive that they're not even looking for real threats." "Time to deadline?" Admiral Chen asked. 3 hours, Colonel Martinez reported. "All fleet elements are in position. Civilian ships have cleared the engagement zone, though the Draconians think they're still in chaos. Social media operation has convinced them that Earth's governments are in complete disarray." The Admiral allowed herself a moment to appreciate the irony. The Draconians had given Earth 48 hours, expecting fear and submission. Instead, they had given humanity time to orchestrate the most elaborate deception in human history. "Send the final authorization," she ordered. "All ships proceed to Phase 2 positions. Submarine fleets continue random patrol patterns. Keep them thinking we're searching for somewhere to hide. Dr. Reynolds, begin final calibration of the broadcast arrays." As her orders were relayed, Admiral Chen studied the massive Draconian ships looming above Earth. They were beautiful in their biomechanical perfection, their hulls streaming with patterns of light that they thought no primitive species could possibly understand. "You know," she mused to her staff, "there's something poetic about this. They're so advanced that they forgot the most basic rule of nature. Sometimes the smallest organisms can bring down the mightiest creatures." In orbit, the Draconian fleet continued their precisely calculated dance, completely unaware that every move was bringing them closer to the most carefully laid trap in Earth's history. Dr. Marcus Webb's fingers hovered over the activation controls for the global sonic array network. In observation centers across Earth's oceans, thousands of scientists and engineers held their breath. Everything hinged on this moment. "All broadcast stations report ready," his assistant called out, her voice tense. Frequency modulators calibrated to Dr. Reynolds' specifications. In the command center, Admiral Chen watched as the final pieces fell into place. The Draconian fleet had moved into perfect position, their massive ships arranged in an attack formation directly above Earth's major oceans. They thought they were positioning themselves to demonstrate their power. Instead, they had arranged themselves for maximum exposure to Earth's sonic weapon. "Status of civilian evacuation zones," the Admiral demanded. "All clear," Colonel Martinez reported. "The Draconians are still tracking our decoy ships, completely ignoring the actual evacuation corridors. They're exactly where we want them." Dr. Amanda Reynolds stood at her station, monitoring the bacterial response models. The simulations had worked perfectly, but this was different. This was real, and if she was wrong, Earth would have no second chance. "Final confirmation of sonic frequencies," she announced, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Primary sequence loaded. Secondary frequencies standing by for real-time adjustments." Supreme Commander Vex Thor's voice boomed across all channels, right on schedule. "Your time has expired, humans. Your pitiful attempts at hiding in your oceans amuse us. Now witness the true power of the Draconian." "Now," Admiral Chen commanded. Dr. Webb slammed his hand down on the activation control. Across Earth's oceans, thousands of modified sonic arrays powered up simultaneously. The frequencies were carefully tuned to be harmless to Earth's sea life, but devastating to the Draconian ship's bacterial control systems. For 3 heartbeats, nothing happened. Then a single Draconian cruiser's bioluminescent patterns flickered, like a light bulb struggling against a power surge. The disruption spread to neighboring ships, creating a cascade of failing systems. "It's working," Dr. Reynolds breathed, watching the bacterial response patterns match her predictions perfectly. "The quantum links are breaking down. Their ship minds are losing coherence." In his command center, Vex Thor's confusion turned to horror as he realized what was happening. Impossible. These primitives couldn't possibly understand our biomechanical systems. Raise the neural shields. But the Draconians' neural shields, designed to protect against electronic warfare and psychic attacks, were useless against such a fundamental biological assault. The sonic pulses continued to rise through the ocean, carried on precisely calculated wavelengths that grew stronger as they traveled through the vacuum of space. "Frequency shift in 3, 2, 1. Dr. Webb called out, adjusting the sonic broadcast pattern. The modification caught the Draconian ship's backup systems before they could compensate for the initial attack. On the main display, the mighty Draconian fleet began to move like drunk dancers. Ships spun in place, their navigation systems confused by contradicting signals from their bacterial cores. Others fired weapons randomly, their targeting systems reduced to chaos as the bacterial colonies controlling them lost their quantum coherence. Secondary bacterial response confirmed, Dr. Reynolds reported, her excitement building. The disruption is spreading faster than predicted. Their attempts to compensate are actually making it worse. A Draconian battlecruiser crashed into one of its companions, their shields failing as the bacterial networks controlling them went haywire. Other ships began to drift, their engines cutting out as backup systems failed. They're not just disabled, Admiral Chen realized, watching the cascade of failures. Their entire command and control structure is unraveling. Each ship is becoming isolated as its bacterial communication system breaks down. Dr. Webb's hands flew across his console, fine-tuning the sonic frequencies in real time, adjusting for their attempted countermeasures. They're trying to re-establish their quantum links, but we're disrupting them faster than they can adapt. The pride of the Draconian Empire, their supposedly invincible armada, was being defeated not by advanced weapons or superior technology, but by sound waves tuned to disrupt microscopic bacteria. The very sophistication of their biomechanical ships had become their greatest weakness. "Send the message," Admiral Chen ordered, allowing herself a small smile. "Let's offer them a chance to surrender before their ships completely lose control. After all, we should show them how a civilized species conducts warfare." Supreme Commander Vexthor's command center dissolved into pandemonium as status reports flooded in from across the fleet. The bioluminescent patterns that normally pulsed with perfect synchronization across his ships now flickered chaotically, creating a dizzying light show against the backdrop of Earth's blue sphere. "My lord, the dreadnought Eclipse has lost all navigation control," his first officer reported, scales pale with fear. "The bacterial cores are rejecting override commands. We can't re-establish quantum links with any of the affected ships." Through the command center's viewing portal, Vexthor watched helplessly as the mighty Eclipse, pride of the Draconian fleet, spun like a fallen leaf in a storm. Its massive weapons arrays fired randomly into space, creating brilliant purple streams of energy that narrowly missed other ships in the fleet. On Earth, Dr. Amanda Reynolds directed her team with precise efficiency, adjusting the sonic frequencies in real time. "Pattern Alpha is working perfectly," she announced, watching the bacterial response data stream across her monitors, initiating Pattern Beta to counter their adaptation attempts. The effects were immediate and spectacular. A group of Draconian cruisers that had been struggling to maintain formation suddenly broke apart, their biomechanical systems interpreting the new sonic pattern as conflicting commands from multiple sources. "Their bacterial colonies are fighting each other now," Dr. Webb observed with professional admiration. "The quantum entanglement is completely shattered. Each colony is trying to assert control independently." Admiral Chen watched from the command center as the most powerful fleet in known space tore itself apart. "Status of Earth's defensive grid. All systems holding steady," Colonel Martinez reported. "The Draconians' random weapons fire isn't even coming close to our positions. Their targeting systems are completely compromised." In orbit, the chaos reached new heights as the Draconian ship's biomechanical nature turned against them. The bacterial colonies that normally coordinated their movements with perfect precision now created feedback loops of conflicting commands. Ships that tried to maintain formation ended up colliding with each other, their shields flickering uselessly as the bacteria controlling them lost coherence. "Fascinating," Dr. Reynolds muttered, watching the cascade of failures. "Their backup systems are making everything worse. They're so dependent on bacterial control that their mechanical systems can't function independently." The scene in space had become surreal. The once perfect formation of the Draconian Armada had transformed into a swirling mass of confused vessels. Some spun in place, their engines firing in random patterns. Others drifted aimlessly, all control lost as their bacterial cores shut down completely. The largest ships, most dependent on bacterial coordination, suffered the worst effects. "My lord," Kafavol called out in the Draconian command center, "the humans. They're modulating the sonic frequencies. Each adjustment predicts and counters our attempts to adapt." Vexthor's mandibles clicked in frustrated rage as he watched his invincible fleet reduced to chaos by such a primitive solution. The humans hadn't just discovered their weakness, they had weaponized it with devastating efficiency. Back on Earth, Dr. Webb's team continued their sonic symphony. Each frequency adjustment was calculated to disrupt specific aspects of the Draconian ship's bacterial control systems. The result was a cascading failure that spread through the fleet like a virus. "Look at their light patterns," Dr. Reynolds pointed out. "The bacterial colonies aren't just losing coherence, They're actively fighting each other for control of the ship's systems. It's like watching an immune system attack itself. The Draconian fleet's attempts to counter the attack only made things worse. Each ship's bacterial colonies, cut off from the quantum network that usually coordinated them, began operating independently. Ships that tried to assist their stricken companions ended up firing on them instead, their targeting systems hopelessly confused. Admiral Chen allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. Send the message again. Remind them that we're willing to accept their surrender and provide assistance to their stranded vessels. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the command center. The Draconians had arrived expecting to find a primitive civilization worthy only of conquest. Instead, they had found an enemy capable of turning their greatest strength into a catastrophic weakness. Their biomechanical marvel of a fleet was being systematically dismantled by sound waves and bacteria. A solution so simple that their advanced civilization had never considered it possible. Supreme Commander Vexthor stood motionless in his command center, watching the destruction of everything he had believed about his civilization's superiority. The proud Draconian Armada, terror of 1,000 star systems, was being systematically dismantled by sound waves. His scales had lost their luminescent sheen, turning a dull gray in response to his growing horror. "My lord," Kafol reported, his voice barely a whisper, "we've lost contact with 80% of the fleet. The remaining ships," he paused, mandibles clicking nervously, "they're beginning to broadcast distress signals. Their life support systems are failing." Through the command viewport, Earth's oceans gleamed with deceptive tranquility. Those sane waters that the Draconians had dismissed as primitive hiding places now pulsed with precisely calculated sonic frequencies, each wave perfectly tuned to shred the quantum connections between their ship's bacterial control systems. "Play back the human movements from the past 48 hours, Vexthor commanded suddenly, his eyes narrowing as understanding finally dawned. All of it. The fleet maneuvers, the refugee ships, the social media panic. In the Earth Command Center, Admiral Chen watched the Draconian flagship's erratic movements with growing satisfaction. "They're finally putting it together," she observed. "Dr. Reynolds, would you like to do the honors?" Dr. Amanda Reynolds stepped forward, her exhaustion forgotten in this moment of triumph. The communication channel crackled to life, connecting her directly to the Draconian command ship. "Supreme Commander Vexthor," she began, unable to keep a note of pride from her voice, "I believe you're beginning to understand what actually happened here. Those chaotic fleet movements you observed, each one calculated to draw your ships into optimal position. The social media panic, carefully crafted to play to your prejudices about primitive species. On his failing command ship, Vexthor's rage gave way to a grudging respect. The underwater activity. You weren't hiding. You were building weapons specifically designed to target our bacterial control systems. But how? How could you possibly have understood our technology so quickly?" Dr. Reynolds allowed herself a small smile. "Commander, did it never occur to you that a planet covered in oceans might have extensive experience with bioluminescent bacteria? The moment we saw your ship's light patterns, we recognized something remarkably similar to our own deep-sea microorganisms. You gave us 48 hours, expecting panic. Instead, you gave us time to identify your weakness and exploit it." The revelation hit the Draconian commander like a physical blow. Their greatest advantage, the biomechanical integration that made their ships so formidable, had been turned against them by a species they had dismissed as barely worth conquering. The humans weren't running scared, Kavol realized, his scales paling further. They were hunting us. In orbit, another Draconian cruiser lost power, its bacterial cores completely overwhelmed by the sonic assault. The once mighty vessel drifted helplessly, its magnificent biomechanical systems reduced to useless crystal and metal. "Your ships are dead in space, Commander," Admiral Chen took over the transmission. "Your bacterial controls are beyond recovery. But unlike some species, we don't believe in unnecessary destruction. We're preparing rescue operations for your stranded crews." Vexthor's response came slowly, each word seeming to physically pain him. You knew. From the moment we arrived, you knew exactly how to defeat us. Our own arrogance, our assumption of superiority. We defeated ourselves. Not exactly, Dr. Reynolds corrected. Your technology is genuinely impressive, but you forgot something crucial. Sometimes the simplest solutions are the most effective, and sometimes the species you dismiss as primitive might just understand certain fundamental principles better than you do. The Draconian commander looked out at his ruined fleet one last time. The mighty armada that had terrorized the galaxy now drifted helplessly in Earth's orbit, its ship's beautiful bioluminescent patterns reduced to random, meaningless flickers. You've earned more than our surrender, Vexthor finally responded. You've earned our respect, and perhaps our gratitude for teaching the Draconian Empire a lesson it desperately needed to learn. The United Nations General Assembly Hall buzzed with energy as representatives from every nation gathered for what would become known as the transmission ceremony. 3 days had passed since the Draconian fleet's defeat, and Earth was ready to announce its presence to the wider galaxy. Dr. Amanda Reynolds stood at the podium, her formal dress a stark contrast to the lab coat she'd worn during the crisis. Behind her, a massive screen showed the ongoing rescue operations in orbit, where Earth vessels assisted the stranded Draconian ships. The message has been translated into all known galactic languages, Colonel Martinez reported from her station. The Draconians have verified the translations themselves. They seem eager to help us communicate clearly with the rest of the galaxy. Admiral Chen nodded from her position near the podium. They've learned the value of clear communication. Dr. Reynolds, whenever you're ready. Amanda took a deep breath and began speaking, her words carried across Earth and into the depths of space by the same advanced communications technology they'd captured from the Draconian vessels. To all sentient species of the galaxy, we send greetings from Earth. 3 days ago, the Draconian Armada, known throughout space as an invincible force, arrived in our system with demands of surrender. Today, we address you from a position of victory, not through superior firepower or advanced technology, but through understanding, innovation, and the creative application of simple natural principles. The screen behind her shifted to show footage of the battle, highlighting the moment when Earth's sonic weapon first took effect. We discovered that the Draconians' biomechanical ships used bacterial colonies similar to those found in Earth's oceans. This discovery, combined with our experience in marine biology and acoustic engineering, allowed us to devise a defense that no one, including ourselves, could have predicted. In the assembly hall, Supreme Commander Vexthor watched from the diplomatic section, his scales now shimmering with patterns that indicated respect rather than aggression. Next to him, Dr. Marcus Webb leaned forward with interest as Amanda continued. But this transmission is not about boasting of our victory. Instead, it carries 2 important messages for the galaxy at large. First, we demonstrate that technological advancement alone does not determine a species' capabilities. Understanding fundamental natural principles, combining knowledge from different fields, and thinking creatively can overcome seemingly insurmountable advantages. The screen displayed images of Earth's oceans, deep-sea bacterial colonies, and the sonic broadcast arrays that had turned this understanding into a weapon. Second, and more importantly, we show through our actions that victory does not require destruction. When the Draconian fleet was disabled, we chose rescue over revenge. We chose to learn from each other rather than subjugate. Admiral Chen stepped forward to join Amanda at the podium. Earth is now known to the galaxy, not as a primitive backwater, but as a world that values knowledge, innovation, and compassion. We extend an open invitation to peaceful contact with all species. Our oceans still hold countless mysteries, our laboratories continue to unlock nature's secrets, and our people remain eager to learn and share knowledge. The image on the screen changed one final time, showing Earth's rescue ships working alongside partially recovered Draconian vessels to help their still stranded companions. To those who might see Earth as a target in the future, know this: We defeated the most powerful fleet in known space using sound waves and bacteria. Imagine what else we might discover in Earth's vast oceans, dense jungles, or quantum laboratories. We prefer peace, but we will never stop learning, never stop innovating, and never stop finding unexpected solutions to any challenges we face. As the transmission concluded, a Draconian cultural advisor approached the podium. "You realize," she said, her translator conveying dry amusement, "that you've just become legend throughout the galaxy. The species that defeated the undefeatable through, what did you call it? The creative application of simple natural principles." Amanda smiled, watching as Earth's first official interstellar message raced across the cosmos. "We're just getting started. Already our scientists are working with your engineers to understand how we might improve your ship's bacterial control systems. There's so much we can learn from each other." In orbit, the combined fleet of human and Draconian vessels continued their work, their cooperation a visible symbol of how victory through intelligence could lead to peace through understanding.